Now, for the second time in the space of 4 months, young Nigerians exercising their constitutionally guaranteed right to protest against perceived injustice over the weekend ran into a headstream of police brutality here in Lagos. Tens of protesters were chased down, rounded up, and forced into police vans and detained for several hours before being released by the authorities following a public outcry. It was still at Lekki Toll Gate, a landmark which has increasingly become a monument to bloodshed and Nigeria's worsening human rights stand on the global scale. What happened and how can a recurrence be averted? With government continually mouthing police reform, how can young people, who are a key segment of the critical mass, to be effectively evolved? To have a conversation around this, we're now being joined by Professor Chidi Odinkalu, a lawyer and former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Good morning, my sister. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Hope you're great.
Well, good morning, Chidi. Good to have you on the program. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Now, I think I think it was on Saturday that you put out a tweet that you said the Lekki Toll Gate in Lagos, which is supposed to be a symbol, representative of the great idea of private-public partnership, had now become a cemetery for fundamental human rights. How do you mean in the context of what transpired on Saturday at that toll gate in Lagos?
Precisely what I said. The toll gate, and thank you for having me, by the way. Good morning. I'm glad to see that you all are looking good and safe. Look, when the Lekki Toll Gate was put up under the Raji Fashola administration in Lagos, the idea was that it was supposed to be a model of what's possible when the public sector and private sector, and it's very interesting that indeed the story that segued us into this segment had a public-private partnership story, but that's another matter that we can get to. But that was what the Lekki Toll Gate was supposed to be. And now it's become a monument to the public slaughter of the constitutional rights of Nigerians. That essentially is where we are. And mind you, all of this was happening, all of that police brutality and madness was happening on a weekend where we needed law enforcement assets present in Shasha, in Ibadan, to protect Nigerians and preclude all that happened over that weekend. But instead, government found it a greater priority to brutalize Nigerians, strangle Nigerians, in full glare of international television in order to make the point that they are in power and nobody can express themselves in a manner, by the way, permitted by the Constitution. Deliberately, they decapitated the expression, the exercise of constitutional rights. And this is what it has become. And don't forget, actually, that when the Lekki Toll Gate was set up under the Fashola administration in Lagos, Raji Fashola, my good brother and callmate, was in fact an avid defender of the right to protest. Today, neither BRF nor the other guy that we saw in that clip, Lai Mohammed, recognizes that the right to protest deserves to be protected. It's the evolution of change to the next level.
Let's talk about the right to protest, because I'm sure as unambiguous as the word right is, and we can even add fundamental right, please explain to our viewers why that is still a matter for debate, why there's still some confusion here, that Nigerians under a democratic dispensation, as this is meant to be, have a right to protest. Can you please help me clarify what in some minds was some kind of exercise in futility or just troublemaking or lack of anything better to do? This is actually how it's been portrayed in some circles, the fact that these scores of protesters went to the Lekki Toll Gate and they're the ones being criminalized at the moment.
Now, mind you, I wish I could do that. I think spokespersons of the regime can try. I really am not going to get into discussing or trying to educate them about the right to protest, because Muhammadu Buhari marched on the streets of Nigeria as an opposition candidate. And members of the current regime who are serving with him all marched as opposition candidates. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has taught the right to protest because he's one of Nigeria's better or greatest lawyers, public law lawyers, as a matter of fact, and teachers, and also exercise the right to protest. I've mentioned BRF amongst other people, so I'm not going to go into giving any of them any lectures on the right to protest, because they are exponents of that right. They are beneficiaries of that right. As a matter of fact, BRF broadcast into Lagosians, amongst whom I count myself, in defense of that right only 7-8 years ago. I think we are past that now, that this right is central to a democracy, is not something that we can be reopening because we've got the slot in power. Someday they are going to be out of power, and that day they are going to need the right to protest. That's the way these things work.
Very important point you made there. The question is, why can't we just get it right as regards the fundamental right of human beings that live on this terra firma called Nigeria? And I say that in a very, very shocking way, because we put this right in the Constitution, but nothing happens. Nothing happens. Peaceful assembly, decide COVID-19, in a time where we have people on another political exercise, but they've never cited COVID-19, where they gather in a way to arrest them. Crowds go to political rallies in this country. Nobody cites COVID-19. But protesters now, the refrain is COVID-19. So what has happened to us as a people?
Mind you, actually, the Attorney General of Lagos did put out a statement citing COVID-19 and the need for protesters to respect the COVID-19 regulations. And if you looked, if you saw, everybody who was arrested was wearing a mask.
So why were they arrested?
The Attorney General said in Lagos, you cannot have more than 50 people. They did not even allow 50 people to gather. As people showed up, they were taken and transferred into a Black Maria. And that is going to become the logo of the LCC, the manager of the Lekki Toll Gate, which is the company that provided the Black Maria, whose engine failed, by the way, right? That was used to transport these people, to keep the Nigerian citizens who were being abused. So the LCC had its own Black Maria there. Now, mind you, actually, the Black Maria, that vehicle, has been prohibited for transporting human beings in Nigeria because of the incident that happened under the military, I believe, when lots of people, detainees, were suffocated inside that structure. But here we have a private company licensed by the state.
Well, Professor Odinkalu, you are making a very interesting point that I'm sure that many of our viewers will be interested in. But let's take this quick commercial break, and then we'll come back to you, and you can tell us more about the illegality of transporting human beings inside the Black Maria. We'll be right back. Stay with us. It's still the Money Show. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Arise News Channel. Our guest is still Professor Chidi Odinkalu, a lawyer and former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission in Nigeria. Professor Odinkalu, thank you for staying with us. You were commenting on the Black Maria and how that came from the LCC, an interested party in the crisis at the Lekki Toll Gate. If you may just conclude your thoughts on that.
Thanks a lot. Sorry, when I'm described as a lawyer these days, I wonder whether there are still laws in Nigeria, whether there are lawyers left in the country. But let's leave that aside. Um, you know, the Black Maria is supposed to be outlawed in Nigeria, and a private company keeps it as part of its accoutrements, acquisitions, for the purpose of putting Nigerians and transporting them to God knows where. And law enforcement, talking about lawyers and law in Nigeria, actually used it for the purpose of detaining Nigerians, and nobody said a word. And government doesn't care. And that vehicle actually broke down. It could not move. And those Nigerians were put into that thing that is unfit for harboring fish or dogs. And they were there sweating, and until when they discovered they could not move it, they removed them, put them inside borrowed buses, and abused them in there. And this morning, or last night, the presidency issued a statement or a tweet congratulating the police for not abusing anybody, when the police, in fact, Commissioner of Police Odumosu in Lagos, has issued a statement saying he is launching an investigation into the abuse of Nigerians by his own assets. That is how bad it is. We've taken the abuse of Nigerians for granted. So this is not just about the right to protest. It is about the methodical dismantling of the guardrails of civilized society under the watch of this regime.
Well, if you were to advise the 40 protesters who were arrested and who were later granted bail, what kind of advice, what kind of counsel will you be giving them? Should they go to court and sue and have the expectation that their rights will be upheld by the court of law? However, yes, when I saw LCC on that Black Maria, I was myself confused. I thought maybe it was another LCC. Maybe that LCC means something else, and hopefully maybe the police will offer us an explanation. Or it could well be that if it is the Lekki Concession Company, maybe they donated that Black Maria to the Lagos State Security Trust Fund. However, the Attorney General of Lagos insists that the Lagos State did very well, the Lagos State government that is, that they made sure that a court was available on Saturday, that otherwise the state could have kept the protesters till Monday, but that it was out of respect for the rights of those protesters that the state government ensured that a mobile court attended to that matter expeditiously. However, the presidency, through Loretta Onochie, says that the police did very well indeed, and that they were very professional in their conduct. You already referred to that.
Yes. And, you know, Moyo, the Attorney General of Lagos, is my brother. I like him very much. But gratefully, he's Attorney General to the Lagos State government, not Attorney General to the Nigeria Police Force. The conduct of the police in Lagos, the Lekki toll gate on Saturday, is beneath deplorable. And anyone who wastes time trying to do anything other than acknowledge that, frankly, does a disservice to the country. For those detained, together with the president of the Nigerian Bar Association and several other lawyers, we're putting together a framework to make sure that there is a process of vindication for the rights that were violated on the day and at that event. We cannot have a country, quite honestly, in which people cannot disagree in a civil manner. And that includes protecting the right to a peaceful protest. There is no question, there is no suggestion that any of the people arrested on on Saturday, did anything other than show up or try to have a peaceful protest. As a matter of fact, you could see that even when they were being brutalized, many of them, none of them offered any resistance. None of them punched back. None of them hit back. Now, and this is that a government cannot celebrate the fact that its young people are active, engaged in government, engaged with politics, able to express themselves is what I cannot understand. How do you build a country in which young people cannot disagree? What kind of country will that be? We disagreed in my generation, Dr. Abati, yours too. We disagreed with the soldiers. They did not kill us. That's why we're still here. You were writing in your 20s disagreeing with soldiers. I was writing at that. I was in the streets and I was in the courts. And we are here to tell our stories at this time. Why is it that under a democratic regime, which we were fighting for then in the late 80s and 90s, we are not allowed to do so anymore? What happened?
Well, a system of government that brooks no opposition can hardly be called a democracy. That's really the fact of the matter. Now, earlier I asked you to address some of our viewers because from my unofficial poll, there were lots of people who were actually critical of those who were exercising their rights to protest out of concern for them to a large part, but critical nonetheless, which misses the point of that fundamental, that sacred right. But I wonder if you have any words for the police force. This whole situation was brought about by in my view, and the view of others, I guess, premature reopening of the Lekki toll gate. Whether or not the idea was to start collecting tolls today or in 6 months, it's just a very bad signal for such a move to be made by the panel before its conclusion. I want you to address the fact that police stations that were attacked by violent mobs after the peaceful protests of last October have not been rebuilt. A lot of damage was done to courts, to BRT buses. That has not been replaced. Why is it the Lekki toll gate? And how is this an issue for all of us? What does this say to all of us as a society? And that the police might actually be backing the wrong horse here.
Or maybe they are, in fact, the wrong horse. I don't know how to improve upon what you've just said. When you go back and look at this situation, a lot that government has failed to address any of the things that arose out of the NSAR's protests. The judicial commissions of inquiry appear to have been set up almost certainly to kick all of this into the long grass. And the Lagos edition of those commissions of inquiry is descending into a farce. The youth representative, I believe, has resigned. The civil society representative, my good brother Ebon Olod Adegburua, senior advocate of Nigeria, has indicated he's no longer inclined to continue. At least 2 other members are also reconsidering their position. That would leave the Lagos inquiry with barely 5 members. And there are the issues that that linger following that have not been addressed at any level, federal or state. Repairing inter-community relations, for instance, repairing confidence between the police and citizens. Those intangible assets around which you build any society that ought to work for its people. Government has not at all addressed any of those. What is it, rather, that government is investing in? Abrogating the exercise of the right to protest.
Well, we'd like to thank you, Professor Odinkalu, for joining us on this edition of The Morning Show. Thank you very much.